Good afternoon to you. I'm Danilo Evangelista, and welcome to today's tropical weather outlook for Wednesday, June 3rd, 2026. And on today's discussion, we are going to talk about the first named storm of the season, which has officially formed in the Pacific. That's right, Tropical Storm Amanda is officially here. The National Hurricane Center gave Tropical Depression 1E, which formed yesterday, a name earlier this morning. We're going to take a look at that, what it's going to do, which I'm going to tell you right now, it really will not do much. It's only going to be a storm that'll be out to sea. And then I'm going to continue to talk about the area closer to Mexico and near Central America in the Eastern Pacific that will have to keep an eye out for tropical development as the tropical Pacific in general continues to get active. But we might also see something get fueled from the Pacific into the Atlantic, especially the Gulf. We'll talk about that later on in the video. But first, let's start off by taking a look at the National Hurricane Center homepage for the Atlantic. Nothing much in the next 7 days, but in the Pacific, ta-da! Amanda here as the first named storm of the Eastern Pacific hurricane season. The latest advisory as of the 2 p.m. update Pacific time. Maximum sustained winds are at 40 miles per hour with a minimum central pressure of 1,006 millibars, moving west-northwest at 9 miles per hour and moving west-northwest in, as you can tell, an area of the Pacific where there is absolutely nothing in sight. Here's a satellite image of Amanda right now, and you can see it's definitely a decent-looking storm, kind of a small one as well. And we had a decent convective burst earlier on, but it's kind of waned a little bit. And that's probably what's going to be the case with the storm for the next few days. It's going to go through waxing and waning phases of bursting convection, and then waning convection. And this probably will intensify somewhat. Here's the National Hurricane Center cone forecast. Over the next several days, it's going to continue to move on off to the west-northwest. And then eventually, as we get towards about the end of the week here, it's going to take a interesting dive to the southwest. But once again, there is nothing in the immediate vicinity of Amanda. Hawaii is somewhere far off to the distance here, but this should already be dead and a remnant low by early next week. So absolutely no concern to land here and nothing to worry about from Amanda. And taking a look at the latest model guidance track as well, pretty much kind of continues to hammer home the point that really nothing is going to show up here in the next few days. It's going to move on off to the west-northwest and then probably, as it fizzles out, take this interesting dive here to the southwest and go a little bit further south. But especially once we get past the 96 to 120 hour time point here, and especially these, kind of tail end points of the ensembles here, more than likely Amanda will have already been fizzled out and in the history books. Intensity-wise, Amanda is once again probably going to strengthen a little bit. Not seeing as many models as yesterday when I last talked to you, and I think this was probably still 90E when I made yesterday's video. Some ensembles here for the model intensity guidance had this strengthening somewhat decently and honestly maybe becoming a hurricane. Doesn't really look like there are that many ensembles doing much of that anymore today. Some still do take this into moderate to potentially strong tropical storm territory, so I think that's still possible. We're probably going to see a 50 to 60 mile per hour peak out of this, and I believe that's what the National Hurricane Center forecasts as well. But nonetheless, a name to start off the Eastern Pacific hurricane season. But something I do want to bring up that is kind of interesting about Amanda, taking a look at the typical points of origin in terms of tropical activity in the first 10 days of June in both the Atlantic and the Pacific. Typically in the month of June, we tend to see most of our activity occur further to the west here, closer to Mexico and Central America. And usually that's because early on in the season, we tend to get a lot of formations occur with the help from the Central American gyre pattern. All things, by the way, which are setting up right now and will be key factors into fueling more development here in the Pacific over the next few weeks and we'll dive into that in just a moment. But as you go further out west here, my point is that you don't really see much development really occur further west in the Pacific at all. In fact, there are no points of origin here in terms of tropical activity in the first 10 days of June in the Eastern Pacific past 120 degrees west. But Amanda is definitely past 120 degrees west. In fact, it's almost near 130 degrees west. So Amanda, even if it's not going to be a consequential storm in terms of its impacts or anything like that, because again, it's going to be very far out from land, it's still going to be a very interesting storm. And in my opinion, absolutely a sign of things to come, especially for the Eastern Pacific Basin this year, because as you can already see, beyond Amanda, we now have two other areas of interest to watch here in the Eastern Pacific. One of them, a moderate chance, and I believe this is the area that we were watching since earlier on in the week when Amanda was still not a tropical system yet. But the National Hurricane Center has now added a second area of development here, and both of these are going to be potentially systems that form as a result of the Central American gyre that's really going to start kicking into high gear here and really fueling development in the Pacific. And I'll show you how that plays out on the models in just a little bit. But probably one of the biggest reasons why we are seeing some of this very unusual activity already early on in the season, it's the fruits of the very, very warm Pacific. Again, partially because of El Nino, which is also really beginning to ramp up right now, and it's going to continue to ramp up over the next several weeks. And I'll probably have to make a separate video on that for another El Nino update, probably not too far down the line, because this thing is really starting to look interesting here. But in general, just take a look at the sea surface temperature anomalies across the Pacific, and just everywhere you go in the tropical Pacific, you have anomalies almost at least a degree Celsius above normal, if not higher. And especially here, roughly within the region where Amanda is, I'd say about between 120 and 140 degrees west here, you could see that those sea surface temperature anomalies are definitely at least one to definitely higher degrees Celsius above normal. So much warmer than normal sea surface temperature anomalies fueling tropical activity. And already very unusual early season activity. I'd say Amanda being as far west as it is kind of the equivalent of, let's say, us getting something in the Eastern Atlantic, getting a tropical wave to develop in the Eastern MDR in June. And usually when that happens, we take that as a sign of the atmosphere being very favorable and a potential, omen for a very active hurricane season. But in this case, it is probably an omen for a very active Pacific hurricane season. And I talked about that for the last several weeks. I said that we were going to have an active Pacific hurricane season, and I guess we are already starting to see the fruits of it come to life. And certainly we're going to see the fruits of it really begin to show up here in the next week. And let's show you that here with the GFS. Taking it out over the next week here. First of all, you could see Amanda kind of churns along here, moves on off to the northwest, and then by the time we get to the weekend and into early next week, it fizzles out here in the Eastern Pacific. But, oh, look at this. Something else already beginning to develop here back near Central America and Mexico. And this definitely comes from energy that kind of develops here from the Central American gyre, and probably also aided as well by the monsoon trough here in the Eastern Pacific and the intertropical convergence zone. And then we have these vortexes that break off, and the models are kind of doing very weird things right now. That's the thing with these Central American gyres, is the models kind of tend to be all over the place with it, and you really don't get consistency in the model guidance in terms of what exactly is going to happen, especially when it comes to a Central American gyre pattern, until you get to at least 5 days out. Because as you can see here, the GFS does all kinds of wonky things. They have a vorticity, pocket developing here, and then one developing here, and then they kind of both combine, or one gets absorbed into the other, and then that develops into a pretty decent hurricane just off the Mexican coastline. But the main takeaway from what I want you to, keep in mind for right now is there is definitely a pretty solid signal of something else developing here in the Pacific, and especially if we're able to get two pockets of energy here. One that kind of goes a little bit further to the west here, but then one that kind of gets held back closer to Central America, maybe because of the steering from the Central American gyre. We could see one of these pieces of energy kind of lift northward and maybe get some of that moisture into the Gulf of Mexico. And I think the GFS from yesterday showed that. Let's actually bring it up really quickly. And you can see actually the GFS kind of did that yesterday. They had another piece of energy here, but I guess that still got absorbed into this whole Central American gyre mess. But then the GFS on yesterday's run brought all of the energy up northward into the Gulf of Mexico, versus today, they're keeping it, west and in the Eastern Pacific. So you could definitely see what I mean when there's lots of variation from run to run, especially when it comes to the models trying to deal with these Central American gyre patterns. So there's still a lot up in the air. But one thing is for sure is that we're definitely going to see something develop here in the Eastern Pacific behind Amanda in the next week. But on the other hand, you can see the GFS still trying to do something here interestingly enough, and kind of interact once again with that very, very broad area of vorticity and low pressure over Central America associated with the Central American gyre. But we're going to get to that and take a look at the Atlantic side of things in just a moment. But once again, I want to remind you, why is all this happening? Well, the atmospheric conditions are favorable. We have the MJO in place, and taking a look at the GFS here, the MJO is going to be moving pretty decently here and basically stalling out in phase 8 over the next several days here. This model run goes all the way out to June 17th, and the MJO is going to be pretty much with us the entire time. And of course, phase 8 of the MJO, and especially phase 1, is the Western Hemisphere, which includes the Eastern Pacific, the Caribbean, and of course, especially as you get into phase 1, the MDR and Africa. But especially into phase 8, we're going to be in the Eastern Pacific, and the MJO is going to be with us. So it makes sense as to why we're seeing all of this activity here. And I'm keeping that in mind I'm trying to, tell you guys to keep it in mind, because the MJO is a very, very important factor, especially when it comes to looking at long-range patterns as it pertains to seeing whether or not the atmosphere will be favorable for tropical development, especially in the long range. And you can kind of see case study right now as to why the MJO is very important and how it plays into tropical development, because it's in our area of the world right now. And because of that, we are definitely seeing quite a bit of activity here over the next week. So it's interesting to see how everything kind of plays out here in real time. But the MJO will be favorable with us. But how's it going to play out in the Atlantic? Well, let's get into that for a little bit right now. But first off, though, here's a satellite shot of the Atlantic. And things are nice and quiet right now. There's not really much happening. There's some moisture here in the Gulf of America. And there was some talk about this potentially trying to spin up a little bit here. And some of the models are trying to do something, show some sort of little spin up here in the Gulf, as again, sometimes we typically have to watch for early on in the season, but things really don't look favorable right now for tropical development in the Gulf just yet. And you can kind of see why if you look closely here. Strong wind shear, which is obviously not favorable for tropical development. Wind shear acts as kind of a, cutoff force. It's kind of like if you're being blown, like you're trying to stand up straight, and then wind shear kind of blows you to the side, and you can't stand up on the side. You have to stand up straight in order for you to be perfectly aligned and, steady. And that's what tropical cyclones need. They need a steady atmosphere, and from that, they need low wind shear. Low wind shear is the steady atmosphere that tropical cyclones need for development to occur. Tries to come up with an analogy on the spot here, and I think it's a pretty decent analogy. Let me know what you guys think about it But yeah, we have strong wind shear in the Gulf, and obviously that's just not favorable. So if you didn't get my analogy, just take away from the point that we have strong wind shear in the Gulf right now, and things are just not in place for development to occur in the Gulf just yet. But I think that is going to change here over the next week to 2 weeks. And looking at the GFS here, well, you can see, first of all, there is some spin here that tries to get going in the Gulf of Mexico. Some sort of vorticity here tries to consolidate and strengthen a little bit, but kind of just isn't able to do so. But then it moves into Louisiana and Texas. And I mentioned this for quite a few weeks now, that the Southeast and especially the Gulf Coast would get in on a lot of rain, and they're certainly going to experience that here over the next week. But then, interestingly enough, as we see, something develop here in the Eastern Pacific, we continue to see this energy here over Central America spin up. And then, interestingly enough, here, as we get to about 1 week out, the GFS seems to try to lift more energy northward from the Caribbean associated with the Central American gyre, and maybe something tries to consolidate here in the Gulf as we get to mid-June. And the GFS, again, kind of tends to be very iffy when it comes to these Central American gyre setups, especially in the Gulf, because there tends to be a lot of false signals from the GFS. So, obviously there's a lot of uncertainty, but it's that time of year. It's mid-June, and I've been saying that we would have to watch the Gulf for at least the next few weeks here to see whether or not something does develop. But to be fair to the GFS, here are the latest European ensembles today. The ensemble plots from the European, so a pretty reliable model. A lot of people like to say that the European is a more reliable model than the GFS is. And interestingly enough, over the next several weeks, coming out of the Caribbean, like the GFS is trying to do here on the 12Z run, something kind of originating from the Caribbean here, probably associated with that Central American gyre. But again, lifting north from the Caribbean, you do see some ensembles here trying to do something in the Gulf. So maybe there is something to it. If you have the GFS operational showing something, okay, you got to question it. But when the European model, especially the ensembles, typically regarded as more accurate and more interesting, especially when they do show tropical development, then when the GFS shows something, maybe that'll be a sign that we're going to have to watch this signal here as we get towards mid-June more closely, and maybe we are not far off from seeing our first named storm of the hurricane season in the Atlantic. But of course, we'll wait and see, and wait here over these next 2 weeks to see how the models hash things out, because once again, there is still a lot of uncertainty right now, and uncertainty that is probably going to take days to kind of make certain, if that makes sense. All right, but that's going to do it for today's tropical weather outlook. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your day. Stay safe. Peace, love, and kindness to you all. Make sure to stay tuned for tomorrow's tropical update, as I typically do every single day. We're going to be doing these updates all the way from now till the end of hurricane season. So subscribe to my channel if you haven't already done so, especially if this is your first video seeing me and you really like what you saw today. Please make sure to subscribe to my channel to get daily tropical weather updates. Have a great rest of your evening. I'll talk to you guys again tomorrow.